Joining me live is the Principal Secretary. Good morning, sir. Hope you are well. We're looking at the government hiring 200,000 youths to clean towns and 10,000 teachers and 5,000 health workers. The government has also spent billions of shillings in regards to this. What is your take in regards to the stimulus package, and how do you think it will be able to make things work well, especially in regards to cushioning the impact of COVID-19 on employment?
Thank you very much, Ram. Good morning, viewers. Before I look at that question that you've asked, let's look at the fundamentals of labor, because we are talking from the point of view of labor, and we know very well that labor is a factor of productivity. And what is labor? Labor is that effort that you exert or services. And when we look at labor from that fundamental, we are looking at people or workers exerting physical, mental, and intellect. And why would they exert that? Because at the end of the day, they would want to receive some kind of reward. So looking at it from that point of view, when we got this impact of COVID, what did the government do? This is a pandemic that just appeared without, without the knowledge of everyone the world over. So as a Ministry of Labor, we needed to look at the labor relations aspect of it first, because quickly we decided and said, these are people who have been working normal working hours, they have been working for a salary, or they have been working in an informal sector where they are self-employed, and they are able then to apply their intellect, they apply their physical energy in order to give a product or a service. So we met as social partners through the leadership of the CS Labor. We called the social partners and we said, can we sit down? Because we have acts that govern the issues of labor in this country, like the Employment Act. Now we agreed and said we need to have our employees work from home. We'll need our employees also earning half a salary, because the enterprises that were then employing them could not pay the salaries because they were not making any profit. So we domesticated an ILO guidelines that had been given to us, and we said, let's domesticate so that we now ensure that there is no, industrial disharmony. And that is why the ministry exists. It exists to ensure that at workplaces we have labor relations. Mm-hmm. We have people that can work with specific guidelines. So we came up with those guidelines, and part of that was that because in the labor relations, we did not have a situation where we needed people to work from home. Within the Labor Relations Act, we did not then have a situation where people would be paid half salary. So we needed to come up with some guidelines that, when the employees work from home, they will be paid at least for 3 months. And that is what we did as a government. We have gazetted that aspect of the labor relations, and we have domesticated what came from ILO. Now, on the side of the informal sector, you are aware that we have around 8.
All right, that is a PS speaking to us in regards to that. We'll be listening to him in a bit. Slight network issues there when it comes to reaching him, giving us a brief overview of what the ministry is all about and the purpose of their work in regards to this. So, PS. All right, you can continue from where you left on. All right, we shall be linking up with him in a bit, giving us his take on the impact of COVID-19 on employment in both the formal sector and the informal sector. Remember, we have a stimulus package that will be unwrapping in a bit, and we shall also be unwrapping the effects of this COVID-19 on the different areas of the country. So, PS, I hear that we're back, so you can continue from where you left on. Just continue giving us the picture of how things are. All right, engineer.
I hope I'm getting heard.
All right.
Yeah.
So, engineer, picking up from where you left.
So I left it when our.
Oh, I just continue.
Yes, I left when I was discussing about the formal and the informal sector.
Yes.
And I say the number of employees in this country is around 18.1 million. Mm-hmm. And we said that around 3 million are the ones that are employed in the formal sector. And that is a group that was really affected by the COVID-19. The effect in his own enterprise, where he employs 2 or 3, and it depends on the earnings that he receives from, the market in order to be able to. These people had to be thrown out of business. And that is why now, earlier on, the government, His Excellency the President, had given an economic stimulus to the formal sector through tax rebates and the rest of them. Now, this time round, he has really injected money into the communities through the economic stimulus that he gave over the weekend on 23rd. And as a government, you realize that then when you inject a lot of funds into the community through the Kazi Mtaani by the youth, through the enterprises that focus on the communities, then you realize that there's money that is circulating within communities in the counties and everywhere. And that is when now people can be able to make a living. But going back to what we are doing as a government and in the Ministry of Labor, we have ensured that when this economic stimulus is being given to enterprises, when the economic stimulus is being injected into communities, the labor relations aspect of it is taken care of. And that is why, like I earlier on said, we put in place mechanisms to ensure that the employees and the employers themselves are able to dialogue during this pandemic period. And the dialoguing basically are just 2 issues. One, if the CBA that we signed is talking about me working from a specific location, with this pandemic now that allows me to work from home, how do we do the payment aspect of it? Number 2, now that the enterprise is not making that much money in terms of profits that we had anticipated earlier, how then am I supposed to be paid half salary without negating on what we had, agreed upon in our CBAs? And that is why now we come in as a Ministry of Labor to ensure that the employer and the employee are dialoguing in this pandemic period and they are able to cushion. So as a government, we are taking various approaches. First approach, like you know, is the public health, where that is being taken care of by the Ministry of Health, and that is how we should be able to behave when we are in social places, the distancing and that kind of thing. And then the Ministry of Labor, through the Labor Department, is looking at social protection and also to ensure that there is social dialogue within the enterprises so that people are cushioned against job losses.
All right.
And the economic stimulus that has been given by the President over the weekend is just to ensure that, 1, the jobs are protected, 2, the enterprises are also protected, and 3, there are new jobs that are created. But and now, 4, to ensure that the new vulnerable groups that have been thrown out of their jobs are cushioned by the government.
Bwana PS, the government is set to hire, just as you've mentioned. So we have a number of 200,000 youths to clean towns, 10,000 health teachers, 5,000 health workers as part of the stimulus package that you've just mentioned that was unveiled on Saturday. But now, from your view, what is your expected result when it comes to the outcome of how this money will catalyze local economies from bottom up across the country?
That economic stimulus and the numbers that you've really counted, and we want to thank the President for this, is that now the youth are able to earn a living despite the problems that we have having been brought about by the COVID-19. And like I said earlier on, we had approached as a government from the aspect of the employers themselves. This time round, we are approaching from the aspect of the SMEs and preservation of jobs themselves. So if you look at the sectors, the improvement of health and social protection, that speaks for itself. At least health is improved by creating, ensuring that the frontline workers are taken care of by the government, and two, so that they can be able to offer that service that is critically needed at this particular moment of the pandemic. Enhancing SMEs liquidity. Just by providing money or funds for purposes of employing the youth to provide cleanliness through the Kazi Mtaani program, that is what the government has ensured, that at least there is an injection of some economic activity within the counties. So basically, bottoms up has been taken care of by the government. And up down has also been taken up by the government through the tax rebates. So what this government has been able to do, and we want to thank the president for that, is to ensure that the impact.
All right, that's the CS speaking about the impact of COVID-19 in regards to the stimulus package, the stimulus package that has been put in place. So Bona PS, right, we're back. So pick it up from just where you left. Bona PS, hope you can hear me now. In regards to the package that you are highlighting, how is it going to affect the the local economy from bottom up?
Earlier on, before I went off air, is that up down, the tax rebates that the government gave earlier on to the enterprises was to ensure that we preserve jobs. And like I said, when it comes to the issue of social dialogue at that particular level in the formal sector, we are there as a ministry to ensure that the guide here too. And I said earlier, social partners, so that again we create what we call harmony, social harmony within the workplaces. Okay. And that one we have done, and like I said, we have already gazetted the guidelines which are domesticated from the ILO. And then the other aspect is the economic stimulus that you are talking about, that was given by His Excellency the President over the weekend on 23rd. And that basically was looking at improvement of health and social protection. It was to enhance SMEs liquidity. Approach in ensuring that there is liquidity at the community level. And that, again, the second aspect of it is to ensure that there is employment and job preservation at that level within the community. So that is going to ensure that at least the impact of COVID is brought to a level that we can,
Now, let's now trickle down to the employers and the employee. We shall be doing that and unwrapping a few things. Let me look at the welfare of the employees. Do you see? We have the Employment Act of 2017, and I will also be touching on the 2020 Tax Amendment Bill that was signed into law by the President. Now, so let me touch on the Tax Amendment Bill. President Kenyatta signed that into law, and based on your feedback or your thoughts, what's the impact of this so far, bearing in mind that it directed, among other measures, that employers be barred from sacking their workers or forcing them to take pay cuts during this COVID-19 pandemic? All right, Bona PS, we seem to have lost you there. Remember, we are having this discussion with the Principal Secretary in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, Engineer Peter, when it comes to this. All right, I don't know, do we have the PS again? Okay, so we'll be getting a link up with him in a bit in regards to the effects of the coronavirus on the economy. Remember, so many jobs have been lost in regards to this pandemic, when it comes to the stimulus package. It was released on Saturday by the President Uhuru Kenyatta. We have the bills that were passed into law, including the 2020 tax amendment bill that directed, among so many other measures, employers be barred from sacking people during this COVID-19 or forcing them to take pay cuts as a result of the pandemic. So, Bwana PS, all right, I'm told we're back. All right, so give us a picture in regards to this, the effects of the 2020 tax amendment bill that was passed into law by the President on the common mwananchi. PS.
Thank you very much. We went off air when we were just discussing about the Employment Act.
Yes.
And I talked about Employment Act being now, seen like we cannot be able to implement the act as it is, because that act was deemed to be working when there was normalcy in this country. But now there is a new normal that is coming, and we are saying, as a Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, our responsibility is to ensure that there is harmony between the employer and the employee. And therefore, then, what we've done is that we have put together guidelines that govern, the working relations between the employer and the employee. Mm. One of them being that working from home. 2, taking leave for a period of 3 months. And then the third one is to ensure that those that have exhausted their leave can now go to work from home, but at half pay. And that is something that the employer and the employee must sit down and work together. But what we are talking about is what will happen immediately and in post-COVID, because these were not anticipated, and so far, so good. Although we've lost very many jobs, what is happening is that the government has come in through the tax relief and the economic stimulus that the president gave to ensure that people are not, employees and employers are not affected that much.
But now,
like I said, the social partners are aware of this. That is FKE and POTU, and we have had discussions and we have appended our signatures on a document that then spells out how the two should be able to behave. That is the employer and the employee in this period of COVID-19.
Now, just delve deeper in regards to this. For those who have lost jobs already, how do we look into their cases?
Now, probably I should have started by talking about the structure of the ministry within this COVID pandemic. Not the ministry, but the Department of Labor, which I lead. And what we are having is that we have a response team that is domesticated, that is domiciled in the Ministry of Labor here, that looks at 3 areas. The first area is actually the employment aspect of it and the social dialogue, and that is under the Department of Labor. That is looking at the industrial harmony and all that. And then we have another one that looks at the responses that are coming from the field in terms of those that have been have lost jobs, those ones, so that from the agreement that we had with the social partners, we are able then to gauge which employer is sending their employees away genuinely. Having exhausted the stimulus package that was given as a result of the tax relief, and also having brought in the issue that the president gave in the other day on the economic stimulus.
And can
so
you be able
ours
to
is to monitor
that?
And ensure that there is congruence of mind between the employer and the employee when it comes to the aspect of relieving employees to go home or work on half pay and that kind of thing. That is number 2. And then the other one is looking at the migrant workers. You know very well that migrant workers is like a jewel to this economy. They have been remitting around 23 billion every month in the year 2019. And that has come down because of this pandemic, because as we all know, that all of us have been affected. So even those that are working in Qatar, for example, in the GCC countries and elsewhere, have been affected by the same pandemic. And that is why then we have come up with an interagency group that is looking at the migrant workers, so that wherever they are also taken care of, because they are Kenyans at the end of the day. So now, what is happening is that we are monitoring closely what is happening at the shop level. Remember also that this ministry is not only taking care of those that are losing employment, we are also taking care of those that are remaining in employment because of two things. One is occupational safety and health. Remember that we have a team that goes around to ensure that even as we fight this pandemic, and even as we grapple with it, the workplaces are very safe for those who are working. And that is a team that is domiciled in the Ministry of Labor that is looking at that aspect of it. So generally, Labor is taking a multi-agency approach, so that we are looking at social protection, we are looking at protection for the new vulnerables that have been thrown out of employment. We are also looking at those that are, in the migrant workers that want to come, and those ones that are working. And then we are looking at the social aspect of the workplaces.
Now, as you look at the social aspects of the workplaces, let's take a look at the strategy when it comes to safeguarding the safety of the employees. You mentioned quite a bit when it comes to the agenda that the government has put in place, and I would like to touch on one of the big four agenda, manufacturing, because majority of those affected are in the manufacturing sector, and that is also based on the document or the report that was released by your ministry and was sent to Parliament. Manufacturing is one of the pillars of the big four agenda, but now what is the plan that is put in place in achieving the Big Four agenda, bearing in mind that the manufacturing industry has also been stricken by this COVID-19 pandemic, with so many job losses being experienced in that sector?
Yes, I agree with you. Among the sectors that have really been affected by the pandemic sector, tourism, and many of them. And like you've said, that is one of the big four agenda of the president. And when you look at the aspect of manufacturing, what we've done as a government is to ensure that we've encouraged ourselves to ensure that we buy what is manufactured in this country. And that is what will ensure that we don't lose jobs, because then we'll have provided a market within ourselves and ensure that then the jobs are we don't lose. But what the government has been able to do through the economic stimulus package is that to ensure that the SMEs are enhanced in terms of enhancing their liquidity, so that the people are not sent home, those that are working in those sectors. So we have decided as a government to take various approaches to ensure that the job losses are minimized as much as possible through these economic stimulus, and the other one that we had given, the tax rebates.
And looking at what we have done so far as a nation, just picking an example of what we did with the ventilators. We came up with our own locally manufactured ventilators right here in the country. What should we be looking out for? Why can't we also come up with also some labor rules that can ensure the safety and security of our locally manufactured products? I remember the president was mentioning Buy Kenya, Build Kenya.
The rules and regulations are there, and they are very, very clear. What is happening is that we've encouraged those manufacturers that are manufacturing and want to sell in the local market to ensure that the quality of the products is maintained. And how do you ensure that that is done? Once these things, the products have been taken through KEBS and they have been given a clean bill of health, we don't have a problem selling it. Yeah. So what is happening is that, like I said, we have a agency team that is looking at the production that is under the Ministry of Industrialization, and encouraging, like for example, the masks that were in need in this country. There are so many enterprises now that are producing masks, including the National Training Authority of the Ministry of labor and social protection. And they are producing around 6,000 masks every week, sold for as low as 50 shillings per mask, and these ones are reusable. So what we are saying is that as a government, we have also put in place mechanisms to ensure that the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya aspect of, encouragement is being done, and it is being led by the government itself. So we don't need to generate other rules apart from those ones that are already there, because we put in place mechanisms to ensure that once you produce and you put it in the market, they are given preference. And ours is just to sensitize and ensure that, yes, they are of quality, yes, they are able to do what is required to do, and that is why we are buying as a country. And when you look at the aspect of ensuring that our workplaces are also safe, like I said, we have the OSH department, the Department of Occupational Safety and Health, that is monitoring those enterprises that are producing what is supposed to be used in this country. So it is an interagency approach that therefore ensures that what we are producing is of quality. Two, that we have a ready market within ourselves that can be able to take, because of the issue of the demand and the production.
Now, according to the report that you had tabled in Parliament, and I quote, the numbers are likely to rise, the numbers of unemployment. You said the numbers are likely to rise because most companies are yet to notify the Ministry of redundancies as required under the Employment Act of 2017. End of quote. So how have you been able to handling all these different stakeholders, considering that this is what you said? How are you handling the different stakeholders, companies or employment agencies throughout this whole period?
That report was given from my ministry a few weeks ago.
Yes.
And I think it is a month ago. And what we did is that we were in the process of putting in place mechanisms of getting that information, and also encouraging enterprises and employers to ensure that they don't undertake redundancy issues before they clear with the ministry. But now, like I said, we put in place a rapid response mechanism in this ministry that therefore, works together with the employees and the employers to ensure that that redundancy that is being undertaken by an enterprise has been sanctioned in a manner that, yes, they have exhausted all that they have in terms of, payment and all that, but they are not able to take care of a specific number of employees within their enterprise. And that is the number that then we are dealing with. And that is why we've given this economic stimulus package to ensure that that group is also taken care of.
And now
the process now is that we have an email that employees and employers can reach us, that team, so that the team can be able to analyze that information and take necessary action. And we have also a hotline in this ministry that then you can be able to reach us, so that we know what is happening within the enterprises. And number two, you should also realize that we have labor officers countrywide who are working even as we speak. We also have the National Employment Authority, which is a department, which is an authority within this ministry that is looking at the employment status of youth within the counties. And we also have the Department of Occupational Safety and Health that is also looking at the enterprises themselves. So we have a multi, agency team that is looking at employment. They are looking at redundancies, and they are giving us information so that we can take action immediately as a ministry.
Mm-hmm. And in regards to the actions that you're taking as a ministry, how are you also protecting now specifically, because we've talked about the employees. Let's talk about now specifically the employers, narrowing down to those people who are providing jobs for the youth. The government set out billions in regards to this. How are we protecting the employers during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Come again. I think you are not very audible, please.
How are we protecting the employers during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. By the way, employers have been protected as follows. One is that employers have signed CBA agreements with employees. And the CBA agreements dictate the employment aspects of and the working conditions between the employer and the employee. Now, we've come in, of course, in consultation with the social partners, and the social partners I'm talking about, Code 2, FKE, and everybody else that is in that space of employment. And we have agreed and said we have to protect one another. One, we have to protect the employee, and two, we have to protect the employer. So what we did is that we came up with a raft of what we call guidelines, so that we are now saying we can produce a guideline on the Employment Relations Act. Nobody can be able to take an employer to court after, he has decided to undertake a redundancy that is genuine and has been sanctioned by the ministry. So, and then number two is that we are also cushioning them by giving them the tax rebates. And for example, if an employer had 10 employees, and we are...
All right, that is a PS speaking to us, poor network there. Remember, these are normal issues that normally happen in regards to this. Employment Relations Act is one thing that the PS had mentioned there. We'll be touching that about that and what it entails. How are our employers also being protected during this COVID-19 pandemic? Bona PS, all right. All right, he's not yet back, but remember, keep tweeting and keep texting our social media platforms around. I'll be sampling them up even as continuing with this conversation on the effects of the COVID-19 on employment and how it is affecting both the formal and the informal sector. Just to note, remember, it was around 3 weeks ago that the Ministry of Labour had presented a report to the Parliamentary Committee stating that over 133,654 jobs are lost. And amongst those who lost their jobs so far, they are in the formal sector. And the numbers excludes employee on unpaid leave and those who have taken pay cuts. The most affected sectors include transport, aviation, hospitality, tourism, manufacturing, wholesale and trade, agriculture, and the informal sector. These are just parts of what the government is trying to do in regards to this. So, Doreen, the PS has alluded to so many things, including the stimulus package that was there, that was highlighted by President Uhuru Kenyatta, and talking about the government also spending billions of shillings to the youth in dealing with the unemployment crisis amongst our youths right here in the country during this COVID-19 pandemic.
The PS has raised very pertinent issues, especially as it pertains the youths and, the young people. But I just want to touch a bit on what he has said, and this is in regards to employers. And I really love what he has mentioned, that also employers are well taken care of, because we tend to lean on the employees and how they are losing the money they're losing, the half payment that they have to part with. But sometimes we don't take time to focus on the employer. So also, how are employers losing? And I love what the PS has mentioned, that also the employers are well taken care of just as much as the employees are taken care of during this pandemic and the kind of losses that they both are going through.
All right, I'm aware that we now have the PS back. Bona PS, picking up from where you left, you're talking about the employers' protection.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. I believe that you can be able to hear me. You are speaking about the employers' protection. All right, so pick it up from where you left.
Thank you.
All right.
I wanted just to go back a little bit and talk about the total employment in this country. And I had said that we have 18.1 million employees in the country. And the formal employees is about 3 million. Those who are in the informal sector is 15 million. And I had said that what really happens is that as a Ministry of Labour, we need to ensure that then there is a good relationship between the employer and the employee. And we've cushioned the employers by giving them a tax rebate. And I was saying, supposing a group is employing 100, for example, 100 employees, and that is an enterprise. And what happens is that, you know, they have been given a tax rebate, which, for example, they will have saved, you know, 2 million. As a ministry, we would wish and to understand how then that is plowed back to the employee so that they are not sacked, right? So that is the kind of social engagement that we are approaching the effects of COVID-19 from. And that is the formal sector. The informal sector is where I talked about employees who employ themselves, and they have employed 2 or 3 people. And this is where the economic stimulus has come in, that was given by His Excellency the President, to ensure that then those who are working within the informal sector are also cushioned. Number 2 is that they produce, we're giving jobs. And number 3 is that you know that there is circulation of money within the communities. So when you look at the economic package that we've been, stimulus package that we've been able to give as a government, it has already targeted the employers, and it is again targeted the employees.
And all right, also you mentioned something about protecting employers. You mentioned the Employment Relations Act. I will be touching on that also. But let's talk about also, still, in the same breath, why do we see an instance where employees go to court when it comes to solving disputes? Is there a possibility or an alternative conflict resolution mechanism where we can have them passing through the labor office?
Thank you, Ram. In fact, the encouragement that we give from the Ministry of Labor is that no employer or employee should go to court before they exhaust all the mechanisms that have been laid down in the Labor Relations Act. And if you can remember very well, towards the beginning of last year, we gazetted the National Labor Board. Yeah, so that is an institution that ensures that, you know, the minister and the cabinet secretary and the principal secretary are well appraised of the going-ons on issues of the labor relations, in terms of labor relations. And then we also gazetted renowned conciliators, some of them who've been labor commissioners. They have been in the labor space for quite some time, so that they can be able to arbitrate on some of the issues that might crop up. And if you are aware, last year, we did undertake arbitration of several sectors, including the aviation industry, and those ones never ended up in court. So what we are saying is that we have mechanisms of ensuring that we deal with the labor relations in this country without necessarily going to court. And that has worked very, very, very well. And in the ministry, we have established what we call an alternative dispute resolution team that is looking at that and ensuring that that mechanism is undertaken both by employers and the employees. So when you look at the Labor Relations Act and Labor Institutions Act, the laws and the are very clear. They are very, very, very clear, and we have instituted that as a ministry.
Now, Bwana Pierce, what are the parameters of conflict resolution that employers and employees need to understand as of now, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic? All right. We will be connecting with the PS in a bit. So, Doreen, over to you. Back to you. When it comes to employer-employee, when it comes to the way they normally solve their problems, he says the first place to run to should not be going to court.
Exactly. That just talks about the kind of responsibility that both employees and employers should have amongst themselves in regards to just what has been mentioned. It is supposed to be sorted between you two. Sometimes, you know, it becomes a bit difficult when you see employees running to court because of the issues that they have in the organization or even in the company. But just drawing from what the PS has mentioned, that it is very important for employees to know how to sort their issues, how to sort their problems with their employers before running to a higher office or a higher place like the court. But even aside from talking about how issues should be sorted out in a company or an organization between employers and their employees, Ram also drawing from what the PS has mentioned, which is very important. He mentioned that in the informal sector, there's about 15 million employees. In the formal sector, there's about 1 million. And that just brings to my thinking of how important the informal sector is to this country. Very, very important for us to focus on how we can even cushion and protect the informal sector, seeing that it carries the highest chunk of employees.
Yeah, very interesting point there, Doreen, in regards to how the informal sector is also playing a big role, you know, in the economy. Remember, it is the informal sector that has, you know, gone down to the roots to the common man 90 on the ground. I'm aware the PS is back online. We are having some poor network there. Bona PS, what are the parameters of conflict resolution? You were touching on that.
Thank you, Wanaguko. What we had said earlier on before we went off air was that we have a conflict resolution mechanism that is domiciled in the Ministry of Labor. And basically what they do is that, particularly during this COVID aspect of, during this COVID pandemic, what we want to ensure is that there is dialogue in between the employer and the employee. And that dialogue is talking about the CBA's agreements that they had signed. That is the formal sector. And when you look at the CBAs, they describe specific parameters of the working relationship between the employer and the employee, which would include working places, the salary, you know, the job description and all that, what they are expected, their outcomes and everything else. But within the pandemic period, you'll realize that there is a new norm. There is a disruption of that CBA agreement that was signed by both the employer and the employee. So how do we come in then? Because, you know, there will always be disagreements in trying to negotiate on how then to implement that, that CBA. So what we are doing is that within the parameters of the Employment Act, we are saying, let's come up, and we did come up with the with the guidelines that would then govern the relationship between the employer and the employee in terms of the salary. Just in case you are not able to employ, how much would you pay this worker, you know? And two, working from home, because that was not the new norm. And then number three is to ensure that you then understand the timings, the working hours. Are you going to work 8 hours as had been anticipated in the CBA, or you are now going to work for 4 hours? And how will you monitor your employee in terms of productivity aspect? So that is where then those are the parameters within which we work as a ministry to ensure that there is that harmony between the employer and the employee.
Now, when there is conflict, at a time like this, so many employers and employees have gotten into conflict with one another during this COVID-19 pandemic, leading to most people losing their jobs. Now, to the common mwananchi, what should be the first course of action when there is a conflict between the employer and the employee?
What we have encouraged employers and through their association, the employees through their unions, employers through their associations, is that in case there is a problem that crops up because of the COVID-19, the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the State Department of Labor, is supposed to be notified. And the notification avenues have been circulated. I told you we have already circulated the guidelines. We have also circulated the hot numbers. We have also circulated our email address to the direct that goes to the rapid response team. So what we are encouraging is that nobody should be able to take any action before the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection is notified, because that is when we know how to come up with, an environment that then both of them will be able to thrive. Employees at the moment are the ones who are suffering, because what happens is that an employee does not even know the kind of profits that the enterprises do. They don't know what the enterprises go through, particularly the junior employees in those enterprises. So that is where the Ministry of Labor comes in and says, hey, let's sit together and understand what is happening, so that even as we send the employee home, we are sending them with an assurance that when things normalize post-COVID, they are able to come back. When things normalize post-COVID, they will come back to their salary. When things normalize post-COVID, they get their employment back. So that is how then we institute what we call the alternative dispute resolution mechanism, to ensure that there is that harmony at the workplace and the enterprises.
You've mentioned harmony, and using that same word, harmony. What is the government doing to bring harmony in employment pursuant to Employment Relations Act? Bwana PS?
Like I told you earlier,
yes,
we have the alternative dispute resolution mechanism.
Yes.
In the hierarchy of solutions to that kind of problem is that we have the ADR mechanism that is in the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. We also have the courts that are also, able to hear issues that might not be, arbitrated by the Ministry of Labor. So what happens is that the government is aware of disputes that could come up, at this particular moment when we have this COVID-19 pandemic. But then we have put in place mechanisms to ensure that any aggrieved person should be able to get in touch with us, should be able to have a discussion with us. We have very qualified labor officers in my ministry that could quickly walk into those enterprises and have issues resolved, and employees and employers, sat together and have a discussion. We also, like I said, we have our employment authority, whose officers that are in the counties can be able also to channel those grievances to us directly, and they can be sorted at that level, at the shop level, and those ones that are not able to be sorted out can be channeled to us. So as a ministry, what we are saying is that we took cognizance of that aspect and we are prepared for it. The Labor Relations Act is very, very clear on it, and it recognizes the alternative dispute resolution mechanism, and it is worked. It is worked because we've resolved very many issues that have even come up before the COVID pandemic.
Now,
and that is when the test of times has now brought us to board, and we are asking ourselves, how do we continue ensuring that there is that harmony even as we deal with the COVID pandemic?
All right, now, what is the exit strategy that you have as a ministry post-COVID-19?
Sorry? Come again?
What is the exit strategy that you have as a ministry post-COVID-19?
By the way, like we said, is that the guidelines that we put in place is during just this period of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Post-COVID, what we are seeing as a ministry is ensuring, number one, that the enterprises that are still on their feet should be able to bring back their employees, those ones that are on leave, those ones that are on half salary, because of the economic stimulus that the president has been able to give them. And even what we are doing at the moment is like we are anticipating that these are the things that will be in place post-COVID. So as a ministry, we'll ensure that that ADR mechanism is still working, because then, there will be a lot of conflicts post-COVID as a result of those that have been sent home.
Yes.
How shall we ensure as a ministry that the enterprises bring back their employees as they were? How do we ensure that we can bring back the CBA agreement that had been signed earlier and was temporarily suspended during this period of the COVID pandemic? How do we ensure that the salaries that are being paid are brought back to normalcy or just about that normalcy? So we are strengthening, as a ministry, we are very quickly strengthening the alternative dispute resolution mechanism. We are also strengthening the labor department as a department itself. We are looking at those who are dealing with enterprises in the counties so that at least they are giving us that information and we work on it, so that by the time now we are going post-COVID, at least mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that normalcy returns very, very quickly. The aspect of hygiene also within the enterprises and within the workplaces is something that we are looking at. We've trained several inspectors in our ministry. We've gotten funds, and the training has gone on, particularly in private and the public sector. And what is going to happen is that post-COVID, we'll ensure that the hygiene standards that we've developed at this particular moment are upheld. And remember that what would happen at that particular moment is that we'll be having less injuries because, and therefore the enterprises will not be paying like they used to do before, because we put in place mechanisms to ensure that the workplaces are safe. And then two is that we are working as a government to see how the recruitment agencies will be able to guarantee that those that are taken out of this country are cushioned when they come back, either through a remittance or establishment of a fund. And that is works in progress. As a ministry, we are looking at that particular one. That will be targeting the migrant workers. And then for the systems that are in the ministry, we'll want to ensure that there is constant dialogue between the employer and the employee through their unions and associations. Remember, we've had enterprises like the flower farms, the retail and trade, accommodation and food services that have really been affected by this pandemic. Those are the areas that the government will be looking into to ensure that they come back to their feet, because we know tourism is a key factor in terms of what the remittances to this country, the economic, a key factor in the economy of this country. And those are the areas that we'll be looking at as a ministry to ensure that they come back on their feet and there is industrial harmony in between the employers and the employees themselves.
You mentioned quite a lot, and for the common man on the ground, they may wonder, what should they do post-COVID, especially for those who have lost a job? Is there plans for job restoration for the youth?
Aguko, what is happening at the moment during this pandemic is that the government is working day and night, to ensure that we prepare for the post-COVID. Mm-hmm. And that preparation is not only within the Ministry of Labor, it is the whole government, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
We have enterprises that will have, lost, will have lost in terms of this pandemic.
Yeah.
There are enterprises that will have come up. There are those ones. So what the government is doing is that it is monitoring to ensure that post-COVID, we come back, we take a very short period coming back to normalcy. So those employees that will have lost jobs during this particular moment, and like I told you, we are taking data of the same, and we are trying to see whether we can also intervene through other funding mechanisms, particularly those ones that are in the informal sector. We are taking stock of the impact so that post-COVID, we know who and where is the person that we need to come up to ensure that they are cushioned, right?
Now,
if they are not able to come back into employment, what as a government shall we be able to do? How shall we cushion them? And you can see the economic stimulus that the president announced over the weekend is speaking to that aspect of what we are saying. Kazi Mtaani, for example, that is a program that is ensuring that there is a livelihood in the community. Yeah.
Now,
the enterprises, the SMEs that are being cushioned by giving, ensuring that they have liquidity. Those are the things that the government is doing. So there is a multi-agency approach towards ensuring that post-COVID, we come back to normalcy as quickly as possible.
Now, one appears, because of the interest of time, maybe you can give us your recommendation, especially to the nation, to the employed, both those who have lost and those who have not lost, the employed and the unemployed. Recommendations to the nation.
What I want to say is that I want to assure the public that the government is on top of things. And that is why you can see it's injecting a lot of money in billions into the community. Two, there is the social protection aspect of it. And you know, social protection was earlier on targeting the vulnerable. And we have the new vulnerables now that have been taken out of employment. And like I said, most of those who are affected were the ones who are the informal sector. And what my ministry has done in the recent past is to ensure that we have a record of all those that have been affected in one way or another, and they have been made vulnerable. So that once we have that figure and we know the numbers, and I think by the end of this.
All right, network issues there with the principal secretary. I don't know if you can have him back.
That are ensuring that those who are affected by this pandemic, particularly the employees themselves, are taken care of through various programs that the government has come up with.